Hello and welcome to the January edition of Missouri Legislative Update. This month we're reporting to you from the third floor rotunda, just outside the Senate and House chambers. I'm Jennifer Yapel reporting for the Missouri Senate.
And I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting for the Missouri House of Representatives. Members of the Missouri House returned to Jefferson City to begin the second regular session of the 97th General Assembly. In this month's top story, we take a look at the priorities of the Missouri House in 2014. With the sound of the gavel, lawmakers began the 2014 legislative session. In front of 108 Republicans, 52 Democrats, and others, the Speaker of the Missouri House delivered his game plan for the upcoming year.
Our agenda this year will focus on four major policy areas: growth and opportunity for all, guaranteeing access to a great education, generating affordable and abundant energy, and guarding and protecting Missouri values.
The Speaker calls his plan the 4G agenda. One item missing from the Speaker's agenda is Medicaid expansion, the number one priority for House Democrats.
So tell me now why, after we have been working on this the entire interim, that all of a sudden it's just not going to be brought up. I mean, why did we waste all the taxpayers' dollars having these interim committees if they weren't going to do anything?
Following a December special session which failed to land Boeing's new 777X manufacturing plant, the Speaker urged a broad-based approach to economic development.
Missourians need and want lower taxes. Missourians also want us to engage in significant reforms of our tax credit system, end our governor's practice of picking winners and losers via a centralized planning authority. Missourians want tax breaks for all, not just the chosen few.
The Speaker said that we need new, fresh ideas. None of those ideas were new. They were the same ones over and over again. All of the crazy stuff that was brought to the floor last year, Sharia law, drones, all that stuff's been filed again. It's nothing new. There's no new ways to create jobs in this state.
Lawmakers now turn their attention to January 21st at 7 p.m., when Governor Nixon will deliver his annual State of the State address and present his legislative agenda for 2014.
Lawmakers in the upper chamber ushered in the 2014 legislative session with one less member and almost 200 pre-filed bills. Senate Communications correspondent Brad Bayshore reports on opening day and the priorities outlined by Senate leadership.
Shortly after the Senate gavelled in for the second regular session of the 97th General Assembly, members exchanged pleasantries and quickly began their work. Senate Majority Floor Leader Ron Richard of Joplin opened up the floor for members to file new bills.
If there's any member that desires to introduce bills, they may do so. They may leave them with me or the Secretary of the Senate.
The Senate is one member short this session after Senator Ryan McKenna of Crystal City resigned late last year to take on a new role in the governor's cabinet. This brings down the total number of senators to 33.
Senator McKenna has now moved on. He has a new challenge in his life as of December 18th. He has taken over as the director of the Missouri Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, and pending Senate confirmation, he will be in that role for quite some time.
After morning recess, Senate leaders answered questions asked by members of the media. Senate President Pro Tem Tom Dempsey of St. Charles says that besides passing a budget, the Senate aims to address the current situation regarding Missouri's school transfer law.
Philosophically, we believe that every child deserves access to a quality education. I think under most circumstances, we prefer that to be in the communities in which those children live.
Senate Minority Floor Leader Jolie Justice of Kansas City says the Senate has shown the ability to work together in a bipartisan fashion in the past, and that her side of the aisle is ready to go to work.
I think there are certain things that we might be opposed to, but not wholesale. For instance, Democrats are not opposed to tax cuts. We've never been opposed to tax cuts. We like the idea of tax reform. It's just a matter of who's getting those cuts.
Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Brad Bayshore.
Governor Jay Nixon's annual State of the State address brought out unique emotions from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. In this next story, we take a look at what lawmakers had to say about the governor's primetime speech.
The governor of the state of Missouri now approaches the chamber.
Governor Jay Nixon presented his State of the State address in front of a packed House chamber. Raucous cheers from one side of the aisle, followed by pensive stares from the other, complimented the primetime speech. Most of the governor's speech focused on his proposed budget for 2015. Governor Nixon proposed a $28 billion budget, the largest in state history.
I did not hear one single proposed substantive legislative solution to any of the challenges facing our state. It was all based upon the fact that if we throw more money at our problems, that'll somehow solve the problems we have.
Nixon's 2015 budget includes an increase of more than $275 million for elementary and secondary education. The proposed increase would put the state on a 2-year path to fully fund the state's foundation formula for education.
Very excited about the governor's budget proposal. I think it's been a long time coming that we can finally look forward to fully funding the foundation formula. And in 2 years, that's a wonderful thing.
However, not everyone agrees with the governor's proposed budget. House leadership claims Nixon based his budget on lofty economic predictions. Nixon's budget calls for more than 5% growth over the next fiscal year, while House and Senate leaders are budgeting for revenue to grow by 4.2%.
We're not going to go along with those numbers. We're going to hold the line on where we think the spending should be, continue to balance the budget as we see fit, and make the necessary cuts in what he's proposed.
I think that what we need to do is move forward with the governor's number, and we'll see from there. I mean, it's his job to make sure that we have a balanced budget.
Following the governor's primetime speech, lawmakers now begin the process of crafting the state's 2015 operating budget. Lawmakers must truly agree and finally pass the state's budget by May 9th at 6 p.m. Members of the Missouri House Committee on Workforce Development and Workplace Safety discussed a proposal intended to attract new jobs to Missouri. Supporters believe the bill is vital to Missouri's growth, while opponents claim it does more harm than good. The Missouri House Committee on Workforce Development and Workforce Safety debated a hot-button issue intended to attract new jobs to Missouri. Commonly referred to as Right to Work, House Bill 1099 creates the Freedom to Work Act. The proposal makes it illegal for employees to be required to pay union dues as terms of their employment. Currently, unions can charge fees to non-union members who fall under its collective bargaining agreement with their employers. At the moment, there are 24 right-to-work states in the country. 6 of those states border Missouri.
Freedom to work is a necessary bill if Missouri wishes to regain competitive standing with the states that surround us. This important legislation will encourage job growth. I believe it will make unions stronger, and it will promote individual freedom for workers across our great state.
One group not buying the sponsor's logic is organized labor. Union supporters claim the legislation's intent is to cripple unions, which could have a devastating impact on workers across the state.
It doesn't just drive down the wages of union men and women, it drives down the wages of non-union men and women. Every state that's gone right to work, every time, every single instance, has always driven down wages across the board.
Following the hearing, no further action was taken on the bill.
Once lawmakers laid out their priorities for the 2014 legislative session, work quickly began in Senate committees.
And this committee was composed of prosecutors.
Members of the Senate Judiciary and Civil and Criminal Jurisprudence Committee held one of its first meetings of the year to hear testimony on Senate Bill 491, sponsored by Senate Minority Floor Leader Jolie Justice of Kansas City, designed to restructure Missouri's criminal code.
What this tool will create for prosecutors and defense lawyers is something that is going to be more streamlined and more efficient. It is ultimately going to be better for, frankly, the economics of the state when it comes to judicial efficiency, and it's also going to be better for public safety.
Senator Kurt Schaefer of Columbia agrees that the code needs to be updated, but shares his concerns about updating every section at once.
So when you get your criminal complaint, from your police department or from your county sheriff, and you're the prosecutor and you're looking at making a charging decision, whereas you're very comfortable with what exists because it's existed for 30 years or more, you're suddenly going to be in a position to say, I don't even know, I got to go through here. What is this even, what applies?
The bill revising Missouri's criminal code still needs committee approval before it can be considered by the full Senate. The Senate Education Committee has already conducted several hearings this year. Senator David Pierce of Warrensburg is the sponsor of Senate Bill 492, which would incorporate performance-based funding for public colleges and universities.
But the concept of performance funding is, I believe, very solid and one that needs to be promoted and certainly discussed this year.
This bill would transition Missouri away from enrollment-based funding to one that instead uses a formula to allocate money based on the number of students who complete courses and receive their degrees. This measure has since been voted out of committee. This same committee also heard testimony on several measures relating to school accreditation and student transfers, sponsored by 5 St. Louis area senators, including Senator Eric Schmidt of Glendale and Senator Scott Sifton of Afton.
This is one of the single most important issues to take up this year. It also happens to be one of the more complex ones, depending on how we ultimately approach it.
So it's my view that this is the year for us to sort of come together and recognize that we need to do things that we can get done that can improve the conditions for every kid in the state, regardless of where they live, to get a good education.
Final approval in this committee would send these measures to the full Senate for debate. Another one of the Senate's top priorities was considered in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Senate Bill 496, sponsored by Senator Schmidt, would create an individual income tax deduction for business income and phase that in over 5 years. Senator Schmidt says his legislation will grow Missouri economy and expand the state's tax base that would support other services.
I believe that allowing people and businesses to keep more of their own money and making those decisions is a smart thing for us to do.
During the committee hearing, Senator Paul Lavoda of Independence mentioned the previous tax reform bill vetoed by the governor last year.
The point of and I don't want to speak for the governor, but the point of the veto was not, hey, we shouldn't have less taxes. The point was we shouldn't demolish our revenues to hurt our other responsibilities.
Senator Schmidt's measure has been combined with the Senate's lead income tax reform bill, which has since received committee approval. These and other Senate committees will continue to consider these filed bills throughout the 2014 legislative session. Members of the Senate Appropriations Committee have also started their meetings to examine how dollars will be allocated to state departments and programs. We'll highlight these actions in our future programs. Coming up next, veteran Capitol reporter Bob Priddy sits down with Senate President Pro Tem Tom Dempsey to discuss key issues lawmakers will address during this session. Stay tuned.
For those dealing with the struggles of caring for a loved one, we hear you. Visit aarp.org/caregiving for advice and support.
Welcome to Capitol Dialogue. I'm Bob Priddy from the Missourinet. We're glad to have you with us. It's not often that we get the leader of the whole state Senate on our program, and we have Senator Tom Dempsey from St. Charles with us today, the President Pro Tem of the Senate. This is your second time around as the leader of the state Senate. What do you enjoy most about this job?
Well, the leadership aspect of it and trying to develop leadership in others. I'd say that's what I enjoy the most. It's because of term limits. We need to develop leadership. Members, it takes them some time to, after they get elected, to understand how the process works. And how to file an amendment, the procedure that we go through on the Senate floor. But it's really helping them to be the best that they can be, understanding why they've come to Jefferson City, and really working with them to, achieve their goals where we can find agreement or where we can work together. And I would say that's for Republicans and Democrats.
What have you found to be the hardest thing about being pro tem?
That as much as there are issues that I care about, that I can advocate and that I can push forward with the position that I have and try to work with others, that sometimes there's a threshold that I can't get it done because of our Senate rules over a vocal minority. I would say that's probably my most frustrating. Those are my most frustrating days.
Do you have to be a mediator very often? Because you not only have two parties here, but you have differences within the two parties. Are you the one that has to sit some sides down and say, okay, let's be adults here?
Well, I won't say let's be adults. I guess that would insinuate that they're children. But, I think that I'm at 20,000 feet on a lot of issues, and we have priorities as a caucus. I have, my own priorities, and there are things that are they're important to the state of Missouri, and I think a lot of those are in those same groupings. But kind of where something is stuck, if I might be able to be another set of eyes or another set of ears that can help it get unstuck and really kind of help members work with one another.
Sometimes relations between the House and the Senate are not entirely smooth. Do you get to work with the Speaker very often, very closely, and try to smooth things out?
Yeah, I think we have a good personal relationship. I think how the House operates is different than how the Senate operates, but how we're elected, frankly, is different, and I think that lends itself to some of the friction between the two bodies, even when, in this case, both are under Republican control.
You were in the House before you came over here. Has that been helpful to you as a pro tem in trying to deal with the people over on the other side now? At least you understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think my experiences helps give me another perspective of what might be happening in the House or why something might be happening in the House, or the challenges of leadership in the House as you try to move the state forward.
There are some obvious major issues as we start this session. As we talk here, we're only about 3 or 4 weeks into it. What do you list as your priorities or your caucus's priorities as we head down the road toward the middle of May?
Well, I just took a report in for, I guess, this year's version of tax cut legislation. I think it's a scaled down bill from last year's. We're going to, I think, let members reflect over the weekend on it. We're not trying to rush it through. I think that's one of the things we learned from last year is, even though there are many capable people, words mean things, and so we have to be very careful in how we craft legislation. And so the tax cut bill is something we're working on. The thing that I've talked most often about is this school transfer issue. And after the legislature got out of session last year, the courts ruled in June. They upheld our 1993 law that allows children in failing who live in the area boundaries of a failing school district to go to an accredited district in either a neighboring district or neighboring county. And I think both that law and the court decision, philosophically, I think what that statement that comes out of those two things is that we're not going to accept failure in the state of Missouri. Unfortunately, after 1993 and up until today, the legislature failed to outline a process for those transfers to occur, and that's where we have a problem. And if we don't act on it this year, it's very likely that it would affect the Kansas City metropolitan area. And then there are questions that with our new testing standards, that our largest school district, the St. Louis City School District, and some rural school districts could also be failing school district. And I think, well, let's put it this way. I want to know that I did everything that I could to resolve this year, because I fear what will happen if we don't act and put a process that really makes that helps the kids, helps the families, and protects limited resources at the local level and state revenue as well.
You made an interesting point when you talked about out-of-state districts. I think a lot of folks who think of failing school districts look at the 3 that are on the failing list right now and say, well, this is an urban problem.
Yeah.
Fact is, we have a lot of rural districts that also are on a banana peel with one foot in the grave.
I think there are at least a half a dozen districts that could be deemed failing districts next year if they don't pull their testing up.
And those are districts that not only have another district that's not that close to them, but they might be moving people into a distant next county.
Yeah, and I had people that look at this as, well, that's a St. Louis problem and it's a Kansas City problem. Why should this be the top priority for the Senate? Why is it a Senate concern? Well, one of the things up for consideration with one of the districts is come March 31, because they've got to pay the transportation costs, they could be closing up shop. And what do you do with the 3,000 kids that are in the district? They've asked the state for $5 million, so now it involves the entire state of Missouri. And you can say, well, we're not going to give them the $5 million, but okay, you don't do that, and then what happens? It's that's one of the things as my job is, here's the action, or inaction, there's the reaction to that, and what's the long-term consequences? And what are we going to do with the kids that are in the school, in a bankrupt school system? And so, and that's just this year.
First bill debated in the Senate this year is a bill on gubernatorial appointments. It's an interesting choice to be the #1 bill.
I thought it was timely because during the first 30 days, as outlined in our laws, we consider the interim appointments. And there's usually quite a few made that are in the interim. I think we've got almost 90 appointments under consideration in the first 30 days. So at a time when we're dealing with the, very directly the appointments process, I think it's a good time to talk about the policy of it.
Is this going to interfere, do you think, with the governor's ability to appoint people? Or just change it?
I think we're just trying to shed light on a problem. And, I've been clear in that this isn't just a Governor Nixon problem. I think it's grown to the point where it needs our attention. Other governors have been lax in making appointments, but there are these licensing boards have a regulatory function. I mean, they've got people they need to get improved to be certified to work in the state of Missouri. And if they can't even meet because they don't have a quorum, then government is breaking down. And so we need to address it. I know we were concerned about the number of acting directors he had, and he's made several of those. They're now going through the advice and consent process. So, I'm hopeful that they're paying attention now.
We have about a minute left. A criminal code is another bill that the Senate's been working on, the legislature's worked on for 2 or 3 years. Does it stand a good chance of getting through this year?
We're going to spend considerable time on it. It's, a 500, 600 page bill. It changes criminal laws, and we're going to take the time to walk our way through it, and I'm hopeful that we can pass that out of the Senate this year.
After the break, Bob Priddy sits down with a member of the Missouri House to get the other side of the story. That's when we return on Missouri Legislative Update.
Here at the GED Pep Talk Center, we have pep talkers standing by to get you motivated for your GED diploma. Get your GED Pep Talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
We've moved to the House chamber now. We're talking to Representative Gail McCann Beatty, who is from Kansas City, serving in her second term. This is the second half of your second term.
Yes.
You still enthusiastic about this job?
Very much so.
What is it about being a representative that really encourages you, that pumps you up?
Probably having the opportunity to actually work with my constituents. And a lot of times it's not even necessarily major state issues. Sometimes it's really some of the local stuff, but being able to help constituents with problems.
Sometimes I think that's something that people don't understand about the representatives and senators. Is, you get to sit in this wonderful chamber and get up and debate and all that stuff. Folks don't realize how much of your work is done on behalf of constituents, answering constituent concerns and dealing with them.
I think that's probably the majority of the work that I do. I've been spending a lot of time doing events with my seniors. Recently, there's been a lot of questions about qualifying for Medicare and spend down, and so we've hosted and had several of the departments come to actually talk to them to help explain the process. And I think that's been really beneficial, and to the point that I've been asked to put on several other additional programs like that.
You suddenly found, I'll bet, when you were a freshman, that you had to learn an awful lot about a lot of things and be almost an expert in everything, because people expected you not only here, but at home, they expected you to be able to answer all their questions. How were you able to do that?
I don't think you ever really become the expert. The good thing is that we do have access to the experts. And so I rely a lot on our departments, on our liaisons, and they are fantastic at answering our questions. And then you can take those back to the constituents.
You're on a very important committee this time around, and that's a budget committee, budget and appropriations. A lot of work, and since the House of Representatives starts work on the budget and then sends it over to the Senate, you get the first crack at this thing. The governor has recommended a record-setting budget with $9 billion in general revenue in it. Were you surprised by how much money he put into the budget that he recommended to the House of Representatives and the Senate in his State of the State address?
Well, I don't know so much whether or not it was a surprise. We've had some conversation about it, but I am thrilled with the increased funding that he's putting into education, and I think we're going to see education is going to be a huge topic throughout this session, particularly the school transfers, early childhood education. So I'm excited that we are really investing in our children.
The majority of Republicans have had some very caustic things to say about the governor's budget proposal. In fact, I was just in a Senate committee hearing a few minutes ago with the Appropriations Committee where the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee referred to the budget proposal the governor put forth as a fiction. How do you deal with that kind of attitude toward the governor's budget proposal? Because this will be now your fourth budget, right? So how do you deal with the large majority party attitude toward the governor's spending plans?
I think what we have to do is look at the governor's budget and kind of take everything one step at a time. I think when we look at the education piece and the foundation formula, we've made a promise to Missourians that we're going to provide a quality public education. And the governor's proposal is finally giving us an opportunity to do that. So I think we need to look at that. There are some pieces to that budget that rely on some other legislation being passed. We've got the streamlined sales tax, we've got amnesty, we've got Medicaid expansion, all of which are huge items for the state. And I think the governor has advisors that are giving him information that is accurate, and we'll work with that. And then we'll have to just try to work across the aisle to try to come up with some kind of compromise in the process.
You just mentioned three very important issues within the budget. One is Medicaid expansion, which the legislature has refused to bring about. Do you have any particularly optimistic feelings that it might happen this time?
I am incredibly hopeful that we are going to be able to do something with Medicaid expansion. When we talk about economic development and creating jobs, this is probably the largest jobs bill that we've seen. The estimate is 24,000 jobs, and that's just in the healthcare industry. We're looking at 300,000 Missourians that will have access to care. And then we're also looking at the fact that right now our dollars aren't coming back to Missouri, and we need to bring those dollars back. And so I think we really need to start taking a hard look at Medicaid expansion. My fear is that we're going to start to see some of our rural hospitals are going to either have to make substantial cuts, or we're going to start to see them close. And we are going to have to address that issue, and we are not going to be able to continue to put this off.
Another major education issue this year is about school transfers. School districts that are unaccredited, their students can move elsewhere, and the district has to pay the costs of that move, which drives some districts to the point of bankruptcy, as we're seeing with Normandy on the other side of the state from you. Is that a significant worry in Kansas City, that bankruptcy is looming if people start moving that way?
It's a great concern in Kansas City. And to be quite honest, I'm a little conflicted in that, how do I say to a parent, you need to keep your child in a district that is having some challenges with educating that child? But on the other hand, I think we have an obligation to provide a quality public education to any student out there who wants it. And dissolving the district is, in my opinion, not an option. And so we need to sit down and figure out exactly what we need to do to resolve this issue.
And that's our show for this month. If you have any questions regarding anything going on in the Missouri House, you can visit our website at house.mo.gov. I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting for the Missouri House of Representatives.
And if you have any questions about the legislation or the committees that appeared in this program, please visit senate.mo.gov. There you'll find the contact information for the 34 members of the Missouri Senate, as well as the Senate's newsroom website. I'm Jennifer Yapel reporting for the Missouri Senate. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on Missouri Legislative Update.